The heavy winter fog hung low over Muir Woods Road on the early morning of January 14, 2018, masking the stucco houses in the quiet neighborhood of Paris, California. A terrified 17-year-old girl pushed her frail body through a first-floor window, dropping onto the damp grass below while her younger sister, paralyzed by an overwhelming fear of discovery, retreated back inside the suffocating house. The teenager possessed nothing but a deactivated Motorola cell phone, an object she grabbed in total desperation before fleeing into the pre-dawn darkness. Her trembling fingers dialed the numbers 911, and she struggled to explain her own location to the emergency dispatcher because she had spent her entire life locked behind closed doors and drawn blinds. Riverside County Sheriff deputies rushed to the intersection, intercepting the shivering girl who looked no older than 10 due to severe malnutrition. She held up the glowing phone screen, presenting undeniable photographic proof of her own sisters shackled to rusted bed frames with thick metal chains. That single frantic phone call shattered a decades-long illusion, initiating the immediate exposure of a house of horrors hiding in plain sight within an ordinary American cul-de-sac. The origin of this domestic nightmare stretched back to the mid-1980s, rooted in the rolling hills of Princeton, West Virginia. David Turpin and Louise Ropatate met in this quiet Appalachian town, forging a toxic bond built on a mutual demand for absolute authority and isolation. In the year 1985, the couple eloped to the state of Virginia, severing early ties with their own parents to create a private world governed entirely by their own rules. They moved across the country over the next decade, first establishing roots in the state of Texas before settling into the sprawling, sun-baked suburbs of Southern California. David secured lucrative contracts as a computer engineer for massive aerospace companies, including industry giants like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. His substantial engineering income provided the family with a powerful shield of middle-class respectability, financial stability, and societal trust. To the outside world, the Turpin household projected an image of traditional American success, complete with a large multi-story house, manicured lawns, and several modern vehicles parked in the concrete driveway. The local neighbors viewed David as a brilliant, hard-working professional who provided an exceptional quality of life for his ever-growing family. Beneath this polished and affluent exterior, a sinister psychological framework was taking shape behind the locked deadbolts of their front door. The parents maintained a meticulous public facade, presenting themselves to the community as a quirky but devoted family unit governed by strict religious principles. They took frequent elaborate vacations to the Disneyland resort in Anaheim, capturing hundreds of photographs of their 13 children lined up in perfect height order. During these public outings, the parents forced the siblings to wear identical, matching outfits, creating an outward illusion of intense family unity, discipline, and happiness. David and Louise even traveled to the city of Las Vegas on multiple occasions to renew their wedding vows, hiring Elvis Presley impersonators to officiate the bizarre ceremonies. The children stood beside the altar during these renewals, wearing matching plaid dresses and tailored suits, smiling on command for the flashing cameras. This carefully curated imagery convinced extended relatives and casual acquaintances that the family lived a life of immense joy and abundance. Yet, the parents cut off all meaningful communication with grandparents, aunts, and uncles, ensuring no outside observer ever spent significant time inside their physical residence. They intercepted incoming phone calls, returned unopened mail to the post office, and constructed an impenetrable wall of silence around their domestic operations. The forced smiles captured in the glossy vacation albums masked a calculated operation of physical captivity and emotional starvation. A normal childhood for the 13 siblings remained an unreachable fantasy, stolen by the very people obligated by nature and law to protect them. Children their age rode bicycles down the concrete sidewalks, attended school plays, and invited classmates over for weekend activities and birthday parties. The Turkin children experienced none of these fundamental human milestones, spending their formative years trapped behind heavy blackout blinds and heavy deadbolted doors. The mature audience must understand the chilling reality of a suburban community walking their dogs right past a residence holding multiple human captives. Neighbors noticed the strange, unsettling silence emanating from the Turpin property, observing pale faces peering through the second-story glass during the midnight hours. Society conditions everyday people to avoid confrontation and respect privacy, and the outward success of the professional engineer father deterred neighbors from knocking on the front door. The local community missed the glaring red flags, ignoring the total absence of toys in the yard, the lack of voices, and the perpetual darkness of the house. This collective blindness allowed the parents to operate an environment of complete tyranny without facing a single police wellness check or social services inquiry. The psychological torment thrived in the shadows because the family appeared unremarkable to the untrained eyes of the outside world. The foundation of this prolonged nightmare solidified when the expanding family relocated to the town of Rio Vista, Texas, in the late 1990s. Rio Vista offered a vast rural landscape characterized by long dirt roads, sprawling agricultural properties, and immense physical distances between private neighbors. The parents purchased a massive plot of land, capitalizing on the geographic isolation to expand their unhinged methods of control without fear of discovery. Upon moving onto the property, David and Louise abandoned 10 of their children inside a deteriorating mobile home situated far from the main house. The parents occupied the primary residence with the 2 youngest siblings, establishing a stark physical boundary between themselves and the rest of the captive family. The abandoned trailer lacked basic sanitation and running water, and the fragile structure filled with human waste, toxic mold, and decaying household debris. The isolated children fended for themselves in this squalid environment, trapped in a confined space, functioning more as a livestock holding pen than a human home. Law enforcement and child protective services maintained zero presence in this remote county jurisdiction, leaving the siblings at the absolute mercy of their captors. The vast Texas landscape swallowed their existence, hiding the initial stages of a domestic prison from the rest of civilization. Inside the dark confines of the Rio Vista trailer, the parents implemented a rigid system of extreme caloric restriction and physical restraint to maintain absolute dominance. David and Louise delivered minimal rations of cheap food, forcing the growing children to fight over scarce scraps of stale bread and peanut butter. The resulting severe malnutrition stunted the physical and cognitive development of the siblings, stripping them of the physical strength needed to resist the abuse or plan an escape. When the starving children defied the bizarre house rules or attempted to search the cupboards for more food, the parents escalated their methods of punishment. David introduced heavy ropes into the environment, utilizing the nylon cords to bind the fragile limbs of the children to the metal frames of their beds. This introduction of physical tethers marked a terrifying point of no return for the entire family dynamic, shifting the abuse from neglect to active physical torture. The parents conditioned the siblings to accept the ropes as a normal consequence of existence, breaking their psychological resolve step by meticulous step. The overwhelming fear of being tied down in the dark silenced any thoughts of rebellion, ensuring the children remained docile and invisible to the outside world. The trailer transformed into an active laboratory of psychological breaking, where all human hope evaporated under the crushing weight of constant hunger and physical confinement. The ultimate systemic failure occurred in the year 2010 when the family packed their limited belongings and moved back to the state of California. They settled first in the city of Murrieta before eventually purchasing a permanent house on Muir Woods Road in the city of Paris. To guarantee absolute secrecy in this new, densely populated suburban environment, David Turpin exploited a massive administrative loophole within the California Department of Education. He filed official government paperwork registering his private residence as an independent educational facility, officially naming the property the Sandcastle Day School. David listed himself as the principal of this fictitious academy, generating valid administrative documents to shield his household from local and state government scrutiny. This simple stack of printed paperwork served as an impenetrable legal fortress, exempting the family from mandatory state educational oversight and routine child welfare inspections. Truancy officers possessed no legal jurisdiction to investigate the private property, and local school boards held no authority to demand student attendance records or test scores. With a few strokes of a pen, David erased 13 human beings from the public registry, legally trapping them within his unchecked and isolated domain. The California bureaucratic system approved the private school application without conducting a single physical inspection of the property, legally abandoning the children to their grim fate behind the stucco walls of the Paris house on Muir Woods Road. The parents instituted a bizarre nocturnal schedule designed to further isolate their captives from the natural rhythms of society. The 13 siblings received orders to sleep throughout the daylight hours and remain awake entirely during the dark of night. Heavy blackout curtains blocked the California sun from penetrating the second-story windows, plunging the interior corridors into perpetual gloom. The air inside the residence grew heavy with the stench of unwashed bodies, decaying trash, and human waste, as the captives were permitted a shower only once a year. The parents weaponized food to inflict severe psychological torment, deliberately purchasing fresh apple pies and placing the warm desserts on the kitchen counters directly in front of the starving siblings. The captives stared at the pastry, knowing that stealing even a crumb would result in brutal, permanent consequences. David and Louise also purchased hundreds of brand new toys, stacking the colorful boxes in the hallways while forbidding the children from ever breaking the cellophane seals. This calculated visual torture broke the spirit of the siblings far more effectively than physical strikes. The constant presence of unattainable food and pristine toys served as a daily reminder of their absolute powerlessness within the sealed-off environment. The methods of physical restraint inside the two-story structure escalated significantly following a brief, desperate act of defiance by one of the captive boys. The young victim managed to loosen the nylon ropes binding his limbs and slipped free from his bed frame in search of food. David discovered the severed ropes and immediately drove to a local hardware store to purchase industrial steel chains and heavy brass padlocks. The father replaced all the pliable nylon tethers with thick metal links, anchoring the chains to the heavy wooden furniture situated in the squalid bedrooms. The heavy metallic clink of the chains echoed through the carpeted hallways, establishing a continuous auditory reminder of their captivity. The parents wrapped the cold steel tightly around the wrists and ankles of the offenders, locking the brass padlocks to prevent any possibility of manual escape. The victims remained shackled to their beds for weeks at a time, forced to lay in their own filth without access to the bathroom down the hall. The heavy metal links dug deep into their fragile skin, leaving permanent scars and causing severe muscle atrophy from the prolonged immobilization. The physical geography of the home transformed into a maximum security cell block, devoid of any warmth or human compassion. The neighborhood surrounding the property buzzed with the ordinary activities of suburban life, yet a profound systemic blindness prevented anyone from piercing the veil of the Sandcastle Day School. The California Private School Registry required zero background checks, demanding only a simple annual affidavit filed online to maintain active status. Local educational authorities possessed no mandate to cross-reference the names on the affidavit with state medical records or birth certificates. This rigid administrative protocol created an impenetrable barrier, legally preventing Child Protective Services from knocking on the front door without an explicit warrant. Neighbors occasionally observed strange anomalies, noting the complete lack of property maintenance and the accumulation of dead weeds in the front yard. During the late hours of the night, insomniac neighbors witnessed bizarre marches occurring inside the illuminated second-floor rooms. Pale, emaciated figures paced in continuous circles, their silhouettes moving mechanically against the drawn window blinds. The witnesses dismissed these chilling observations as the eccentric habits of an intensely private religious family. No one dialed the police to report a welfare concern, allowing the meticulous paperwork filed by David to shield the ongoing atrocities from the required legal scrutiny. The calendar pages turned slowly from the year 2010 through the year 2015 without a single outside intervention altering the grim reality inside the house. The siblings endured a monotonous, agonizing existence where one year bled seamlessly into the next, defined entirely by hunger and isolation. The severe caloric restriction halted the physical growth of the victims, leaving the adult siblings with the bone structure and stature of young grade school students. The captives lost the cognitive ability to process basic information, lacking the vocabulary to articulate their own suffering because they possessed no access to books, television, or the outside world. The parents restricted their victims to writing in simple journals, providing cheap spiral notebooks and ballpoint pens as their only sanctioned outlet for expression. These hidden notebooks captured the mundane horrors of their daily routines, documenting the precise times they received a meager portion of a frozen burrito or a spoonful of peanut butter. The slow passage of time amplified the psychological decay, eroding any memory of the world existing beyond the heavy deadbolts of the front door. The parents maintained their pristine public image throughout these empty years, commuting to work and attending local church services while their secret prisoners withered away in the dark upstairs bedrooms. Despite the severe cognitive delays and the crushing weight of their environment, the human instinct for survival sparked a quiet rebellion among two of the teenage sisters. Over the course of 2 excruciating years, the 2 girls began whispering to one another in the dead of night, sharing the same bedroom while the rest of the house slept. They mapped out the physical layout of the first floor in their minds, noting the precise location of the front door and the proximity of the front windows. The sisters understood that they needed irrefutable evidence to convince the outside world of their living conditions, realizing their emaciated frames alone might not trigger an immediate rescue. One of the teenagers scoured the cluttered hallways during a rare moment of freedom and discovered a discarded, deactivated Motorola cell phone buried beneath a pile of household junk. The phone lacked active cellular service, but the girls knew that federal communication laws required all devices to connect to emergency dispatchers regardless of carrier status. They hid the device inside a torn mattress seam, guarding the plastic object as their only lifeline to the outside world. The teenage girls began using the device to capture digital photographs of their shackled siblings, securing visual proof of the chains cutting into human skin. The sisters meticulously guarded their digital evidence, waiting for a critical moment when the parental surveillance would lapse long enough for a frantic sprint to the property line. The breaking point materialized in early January of the year 2018 when David and Louise announced a permanent, imminent relocation to the state of Oklahoma. This abrupt declaration shattered the delicate timeline of the secret escape plan forged by the 2 teenage sisters, forcing an immediate desperate exit strategy to prevent their own disappearance. The girls needed to navigate from their designated second-story bedroom, creep down 14 carpeted stairs, and cross the cluttered expanse of the main living room without waking the sleeping parents. The final physical barrier consisted of a ground floor window overlooking the front yard, but as they pried the glass open, the younger sister succumbed to a paralyzing fear of discovery and retreated into the dark corridor. The 17-year-old pressed forward alone, pushing her frail frame through the narrow opening and dropping onto the damp grass of Muir Woods Road. She sprinted down the concrete sidewalk to put maximum physical distance between herself and the Succo house before stopping near a neighborhood street intersection. Her hands shook as she pressed the buttons on the deactivated Motorola phone, successfully connecting the device to a local emergency dispatcher using emergency cellular tower protocols. She struggled to articulate her exact location because she possessed no concept of a postal zip code or a street crosswalk, relying entirely on describing the physical appearance of her house to guide the authorities. Riverside County Sheriff deputies received the priority dispatch and navigated their patrol vehicles through the dense morning fog covering the Paris subdivisions. The uniformed officers parked near the reported intersection and located a trembling figure standing on the concrete corner, clutching a piece of plastic. The girl appeared to the seasoned officers to be a young grade school student, as severe caloric restriction masked her true biological age of 17 by stunting her physical bone development. The teenager handed the glowing cell phone to the approaching deputies, offering the device as her sole piece of physical evidence to support her horrific claims of ongoing captivity. The digital screen displayed irrefutable time-stamped proof of the atrocities, showing clear images of human wrists bound to rusted bed frames with thick metal chains and brass padlocks. The officers immediately radioed for emergency backup and drove a short distance down the asphalt street, stopping in front of the two-story Succo house to confront the suspects. The deputies marched up the concrete driveway and pounded heavily on the wooden front door, prompting David Turpin to answer with a look of practiced confidence. He believed his meticulously filed administrative paperwork provided absolute legal immunity against any law enforcement intrusion, unaware that his digital fortress had just collapsed. The deputies ignored his calm demeanor and stepped across the threshold, immediately hitting a physical wall of putrid air. The overwhelming odor of human waste, decaying garbage, and unwashed bodies saturated the entire ground floor, confirming the worst fears of the responding officers. The law enforcement officers unholstered their standard-issue flashlights, slicing through the heavy gloom of the unlit interior corridors to clear the second floor. They bypassed the clutter of the living room, ascended the dark, narrow staircase, and discovered heavy brass padlocks securing several of the interior bedroom doors from the outside. The deputies breached the locked wooden doors, illuminating a nightmare hidden in plain sight within the affluent California suburbs. A 22-year-old victim remained firmly shackled to a wooden bedpost, unable to stand or move away from the piercing beams of the police flashlights. The thick steel links dug deep into bruised, infected skin, leaving an undeniable physical record of prolonged forced inspolization and physical torment. In an adjacent room, David and Louise scrambled in the shadows, hastily attempting to unchain two other girls before the officers entered the space. The deputies drew their service weapons, ordered the parents to step back against the wall, and began cataloging the emaciated figures scattered across the filthy carpets. The officers initially assumed they were rescuing a dozen small children, but the shocking reality shifted the entire scope of the criminal investigation when the victims stated their birth years. The individuals trapped in the squalid bedrooms actually ranged in age from 2 to 29 years old, prompting the deputies to immediately place cold steel handcuffs on the wrists of the parents. The audible heavy click of the police restraints echoed through the quiet house, signaling a definitive end to decades of hidden torment. Emergency medical personnel established a massive triage center directly on the damp front lawn of the Muir Woods Road property to assess the critical condition of the victims. Paramedics wrapped the 13 siblings in thermal foil blankets to stabilize their dangerously low body temperatures before fleet after fleet of local ambulances transported them to specialized care units. Attending emergency room physicians began the grim task of documenting the profound physical damage, recording severe muscle wasting, critical vitamin deficiencies, and stunted bone growth plates across almost all the siblings. The physical deterioration mirrored the immense psychological devastation caused by years of total sensory deprivation and strict environmental isolation imposed by their captors. The adult victims lacked the basic vocabulary to identify common hospital objects, referring to medication as candy, and showing visible terror at the sight of a medical syringe. They possessed no fundamental understanding of human biology, the concept of a geographical state, or the basic role of a police officer in society. The hospital staff embarked on a slow, painstaking protocol to introduce the victims to a reality they had never experienced, providing their first fresh, unrationed meals in a sterile, closely monitored environment. Their physical recovery required extensive daily nutritional rehabilitation to reverse the catastrophic effects of the caloric restriction and prevent the fatal onset of refeeding syndrome. This detailed medical documentation provided investigators with an unbreakable chain of forensic evidence quantifying the exact timeline and severity of the abuse for the upcoming trial. The California justice system mobilized to dismantle the legal and bureaucratic shield constructed by the perpetrators. Bypassing the typical lengthy delays of the preliminary court system in the year 2019, Riverside County prosecutors built an insurmountable legal case utilizing the time-stamped digital photographs from the Motorola phone and hundreds of handwritten spiral notebooks seized directly from the residence. The physical evidence lockers held the heavy chains, the brass padlocks, and the horrific medical charts, leaving the defense attorneys with zero viable counter-arguments or alternative defense theories. The legal loophole of the private school registry that protected David for years crumbled under the sheer weight of the verified physical abuse evidence. David and Louise Turpin stood before a Superior Court judge in a packed courtroom, stripped of their respectable suburban disguises. The arrogant facade of the brilliant aerospace engineer collapsed when confronted with the undeniable forensic truth of his calculated actions against his own family. Both parents accepted a plea agreement to spare their children from testifying, entering formal guilty pleas to 14 distinct, severe felony counts. The specific criminal charges included torture, false imprisonment, and dependent adult abuse, prompting the presiding judge to deliver a definitive, unyielding verdict. He sentenced both David and Louise to life imprisonment within the California State Penitentiary system, stipulating they would not be eligible for parole consideration for a minimum of 25 years. The state locked the predators inside concrete cells, removing them from the administrative blind spots they once exploited to hide their crimes. The 13 siblings stepped cautiously into the light of modern society, beginning a complex and arduous journey of profound personal transition and psychological recovery. They legally changed their first and last names to protect their hard-won privacy and forge new identities free from the oppressive shadow of their abusers. The older siblings enrolled in specialized educational programs, learning to navigate grocery store aisles, public transportation routes, and basic social interactions for the very first time. However, the path to true justice and safety encountered a tragic secondary systemic failure orchestrated by the very state agencies that executed the rescue. The county government placed several of the younger victims into the Riverside County foster care system, assigning them to designated safe houses that lacked proper administrative oversight. These state-monitored foster homes failed to provide the necessary psychological support, and the siblings suffered severe neglect and further missed treatment under the direct watch of the government. The victims utilized their newfound voices and filed extensive civil lawsuits against the county agencies, detailing the exact bureaucratic negligence and the failure of social workers to conduct mandatory safety visits. The civil legal battles exposed the deep, lingering flaws within the public institutions designed to protect the most vulnerable members of society from known predators. Despite the repeated failures of the adult world, the siblings demonstrated an unbreakable human resilience and a fierce, enduring dedication to one another. The ultimate triumph of this story belongs entirely to the immense courage of the teenage sister who pushed through a rusted window frame, breaking a multi-decade cycle of captivity that the entire system failed to see.